This episode is sponsored by Circle & Bloom. Circle & Bloom has created an amazing offer for the Fertility Friday community. Make sure to head over to circlebloom.com/Fertility Friday to get your free relaxation program. And don't forget to enter the coupon code Fertility Friday at checkout to get 20% off of anything you buy. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 112. Welcome to the 112th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. Before I jump into today's episode, I just wanted to take a moment and let you know about my group program. So I do still have spaces available for the January 2017 Fertility Friday group programs, and I am tailoring the group specifically. So one group is going to be tailored specifically for women who are trying to conceive, and another is going to be tailored specifically to women who are trying to avoid pregnancy. And so I'm really excited about the January groups. I do have a couple spaces open still, but they are starting to fill up. So if you're thinking about jumping in and being part of the group, don't wait too long. Once the groups fill up, then registration will be closed. And I just wanted to share with you what one of my clients said about our work together.
Yeah, this is a really interesting time to be answering that question. I think I would have always been very complimentary and would highly recommend it. But after coming recently from a trip for my very first time to go see a fertility clinic and recognizing the just stark disconnection between the mental, emotional, and physical, that they really treat you like, here's what you're supposed to do, here's the boxes. They don't ask any questions. They don't allow you to be an active participant in the most intimate part of your life. I really can't think of anything that's like really more intimate. And so it's like I came back from that and I like signed up immediately for your alumni group, because I'm now used to, from working with you, being treated with a certain respect and being able to be an active participant and ask questions. And I truly feel like you want me to understand. You're not just blanketly throwing out this information and hoping it lands somewhere. You really want me to understand. And I think that's just so critical because, like I said, this is the most intimate, I think, part of our lives and important. And so I would definitely say, at least start off with the group session. Not only will you get to work with somebody who has a breadth of knowledge that she really wants to share with you, but also you'll meet other women who are walking the same path. And that in and of itself, just to not feel alone, is so valuable.
So make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program for more information. Before we delve into today's interview, I'd like to take a moment to thank my sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Circle & Bloom. As many of my longtime listeners will know, I have spent a lot of time talking about stress and the negative ways that it impacts the menstrual cycle. And I've also spent a lot of time on the show talking about practical ways to manage stress. In episode 93 of the podcast, I interviewed Joanne Verkuylen, who's the CEO and founder of Circle & Bloom. And in that episode, we spoke about the science-backed evidence behind visualization as a stress reduction tool. Circle & Bloom has developed several programs specifically for women who are trying to conceive. Their natural cycle fertility program, for example, takes you through a 28-day cycle. This program has 28 different visualizations that are targeted and talk about exactly what's happening in your body at the different parts of your cycle. Now, as most of my listeners know, all women do not have a 28-day cycle. Most women actually do not. But the benefits of charting your cycle is that you do know exactly what phase of your cycle that you're in. And with this program, you can target the visualization based on exactly what's happening in your body at that time. And as a special gift to Fertility Friday podcast listeners, Circle & Bloom has offered a 20% discount when you purchase one of their programs. So head over to circlebloom.com/fertilityfriday. circlebloom.com/fertilityfriday. Circle Bloom is one word. And make sure to use the discount code Fertility Friday, again one word, at checkout to redeem your 20% discount. So this is another installment of my Fertility Awareness Reality series. I'm so excited to share this with you. It was something that I thought would be a lot of fun to do, to share what I do kind of on air. And I kind of joke at some point, I think typically in every episode that I do in this reality series, which is that we're having these extremely private conversations in a very public way. And I just want to thank all of the women who participated in this series for sharing just so openly and candidly their own experiences. And I know from speaking with each of the women who've participated in the series, both during and, before and after the interviews and our other sessions and our other work together, that, the reason that they wanted to participate and that they were so happy to do so, partly was to have that opportunity to talk about these things that are not talked about. I'm guessing many of you who are listening have had that experience where you learn all this cool stuff about your body, about what it means to be a woman, especially through the podcast, going through all of the different kind of topics that we've talked about. And then you realize that everyone else isn't as excited as you, right? So you can't always talk about this stuff with your friends all the time. So I know a lot of the women who have participated in the reality series have really enjoyed having that opportunity to share their experiences and their feelings around it, because they don't necessarily have a captive audience to talk about all these things with, but also because of their genuine desire to just share information, share experiences, and hope to touch some of you who may have experienced the same thing, and to inspire you, or even just to let you know that, you do have options and there's different things you can do. So a little bit of a ramble, but I just wanted to share that with you before we jump in. And of course, these episodes are for informational purposes only. I am not a doctor. I am not a naturopath, and I'm not playing one on the internet. And so don't take these episodes as medical advice, because they are not. They are just for information's sake. So without further ado, I hope that you enjoy my interview with Amelia. And in today's show, I'm really excited to welcome my guest, Amelia. Amelia, and this is, of course, part of my fertility awareness reality series, which I'm really excited about. So Amelia is actually part of one of my group programs. And so we have had the pleasure of meeting weekly for the last 10 weeks. So it feels like we go way back. But I'm really excited to have her today and to be able to kind of, what you said in our pre-chat, to kind of indulge, to have a session all just with you and I, because we've been in the group for so long. So we have lots to chat about today. And welcome to the show, Amelia.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks so much for being here. And I just wanted to start the show like I have been with the reality series by sharing a little bit about your history. So in terms of your menstrual cycle history, your, contraceptive use and all those types of things. So yeah, maybe you could start just by sharing just a little bit about your contraceptive history, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I think like many women in my generation, our generation, I got on the birth control pill. It was a low dose birth control pill, about 17, almost 18. And interestingly, I had wanted to get on it because all my friends were on it. And I'm pretty sure, my doctor, I was having like emotional surges right before my period. I would get very teary, weepy, and it was kind of starting to cause problems. And my doctor told my mom, oh, it will regulate her periods and, even everything out. And I'm doing air quotes because I now know that unfortunately was misinformation. But so I got on the pill at 17, and then I was on it until probably 29. I'm now 33. So a while, 12 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I did want to ask you a little bit about those symptoms that you experienced. And so when did you first start menstruating? And maybe you could just talk a little bit about what your experience was like, what your periods and your menstrual cycles were like during that time.
Yeah, sure. I believe it was like halfway, like 12 and a half, almost 13 when I started my period. And they were never problematic, really, physically. I had some cramps, but nothing like I heard, my friends going through. And they weren't ever too heavy, that wasn't a problem. But around 17, I remember several examples of I would just be so emotional right before my period. And I would end up getting in fights with friends and fights with people who weren't my friends. And so, looking back, there were some other stressors going on in my life at that time, but we ended up it seemed to be the day or two before my period that was happening. So if I remember correctly, my doctor had told me you have like excess estrogen is what he thought it was. And then again, that we would regulate my periods by putting me on the pill. So that's, the only distinguishable thing, but that is interesting now looking back.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting to kind of postulate and say, I can do a similar thing. I can look at a woman's chart and say, well, it looks like, your estrogen or progesterone levels might be a little low. But ultimately, before you kind of take measures that involve medication, it's best to actually see a person who is trained in the art of lab testing and have that sorted out to actually confirm your thesis around that.
I kind of wish we would have done that. Yes.
But I just wanted to kind of pause on that for a little bit because, the symptoms that you were experiencing were significant enough to be concerning and then to actually warrant you going to your doctor. So I guess we won't spend too much time here because we've got lots of other things to talk about. But I think a lot of women do experience some sort of emotional, change. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes it's hard to know at what point is it problematic or not. And it sounds like it kind of happened. It wasn't something that was happening just consistently. It's something that kind of started to happen. And you also mentioned you had other stressors, but what was it about that really stood out and made it kind of this urgent thing for you?
Like I said, I think in addition to those symptoms, all my friends were on the pill and I kind of wanted to be honest. So I think I was kind of like nudging my mom, but I remember it feeling almost like an out of body experience where and that sounds a little dramatic, but that after I started my period, I'm like, why was I so upset? Like, why did that need to escalate? So it was somewhat problematic in that things were escalating more than they needed to in certain relationships. So, but I really wish we would have done a little bit more digging and so I think I share that only because I think so many women, from what I've learned from your podcast and from working with others, that we all get put on the pill to regulate. And this is like, and it was treated like this silver bullet, like, oh, we'll just put her on the pill and not worry about it. And like, how unfortunate that is that now 12 years later, that there could have been other things going on that needed to be corrected and that they were just ignored.
Well, yeah. And I think, and of course I've talked about this on the show before, but it's like, we have a cycle and our moods do change based on that cycle. And so it's actually normal for things to bother you a little bit more at certain times of your cycle. And I think I kind of take it to like the more woo-woo angle. And I think that that's a way to kind of check in with the things that you tolerate on a regular basis. Because at one point in the month, then all of a sudden that thing that your husband does that really irks you comes on the table. And then it forces it to be addressed. And that might not be, but obviously there's limits to how, you're not supposed to feel deep shades of depression, like crazy highs and lows, but I feel like some degree of that is normal. So I wonder how that experience might have been different if someone had talked to you about your menstrual cycle in a positive way and this being a cycle. And maybe during that time, instead of, maybe during that time, that you're a bit more sensitive, maybe you can chill out for a couple of days or schedule yourself a little siesta. And anyways,
totally.
Bygones.
Amen.
All right. So moving on. So fast forward then to when you came off of the pill. So then that was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It was in 2012. So maybe you could share just a little bit about that. What was the impetus for coming off of the pill and kind of what was your experience of your menstrual cycles when they returned?
So to be perfectly honest, I think I'd always been a little suspicious of being on the pill that long. And again, the analogy I was given was, oh, don't worry, it just makes your body think it's pregnant. Right. Oh. Which now I know that's also not true. Right. Oh gosh. Yes. from you and taking charge of your fertility, I know that's no longer the case, and it makes me so mad. But that's what I was told. And so I think, I was in a, my husband, well, we had just probably got engaged at that point in time. We'd been together for 3 years, and we just bought a house, and I was, again, skeptical of my body, thinking that it was pregnant for 12 years. I'm like, that's not natural, that it can't be good. And so I'm like, you know what? We are in it to win this. So I'm just going to get off the pill. And again, I'm a planner. So I knew I wanted a family, and I thought it'd be better to get off of it and let my body kind of recalibrate on its own. So yeah, so did that.
All right. And I have your Justice charts up here. So maybe what I can do is share the screen with you so we can kind of go through those. But before you started with the group, were you charting, or were you kind of keeping track of your periods? I know some women will kind of tell me like, oh, I was only keeping track of my periods. But that in of itself is really useful, even if you quote unquote just do that.
Yeah. And that's what I was doing. I think I had started doing that end of 2014. Hard to believe, but yes, end of 2014. But very much just through Ovia, the app on my phone, which I now understand to be the rhythm method. But yeah. I was tracking, and interestingly, my periods were very irregular previously. They would probably hover around a 23 to 24 day cycle, but I'd have one as short as 16 and one as long as 35.
Okay.
So this form of charting that I learned through you is much more comprehensive.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. Was there a period of time after you went off of the pill before your period returned, or did it kind of come back pretty quick there?
That's a great question. Even though so that was 2012 that I got off the pill, I really didn't pay attention. I was really busy. I was working pretty demanding job at the time, traveling a lot. And, I think I've even heard this on your show as well, that we just get on the pill and we don't think about it. Yeah. And that was it. That totally pegged me. I got on the pill. I stayed on the pill. I didn't think about my period or what it meant or anything. I can't even tell you. I assumed it was regular, but the weeks go by so quickly that I just wasn't tracking at all. So I didn't notice anything totally bizarre, but again, I really wasn't paying attention. I would have told you my periods were fairly regular. And then when I started tracking in 2014, I realized they really weren't. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. It's kind of like anything that you pay attention to. So I'm just going to open up your charts, and I'm not paying attention. Okay. So I'm actually going to open them up so that in a way that makes sense for me, so I can actually see them. So just bear with me for a second here. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to chat with you about today is the observational routine. So all the things with my clients who I've been working with for a while, I typically send out, and it's the questionnaire that you filled out. So I typically send out a questionnaire to just check in about the knowledge around charting, to make sure that we are always starting off with that basic knowledge, so that we're recording everything right. And so maybe you could just share a little bit about your experience, how your understanding of mucus and everything has changed from when you first jumped into the group to now kind of 10 weeks in, where we've kind of hashed out a lot of the charting stuff. Yeah,
sure. Before joining the group, I really didn't know anything about cervical mucus at all. I knew that, there was arousal mucus, but I had no knowledge of cervical mucus and its purpose or anything. So this was really eye-opening, and, kind of just bringing it back to basics in a total, duh moment. Our body is telling us, and I remember learning on Fertility Friday about how some studies show that 50% of women who go through IVF don't need to. And then it's simply just a matter of not understanding our body's, indicators. So I definitely was following the rhythm method before. And it's frustrating when I had a very well-known gynecologist and who specializes in infertility telling me, very much preaching to me about the 28-day cycle and all of that. So this was just very eye-opening and just really nice to return to trusting my body.
Yeah.
And working with it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there was a few interesting things that came out as we were working together. So I guess one of the things that, I'm looking at Amelia's charts right now. So we're sharing our screen here on our call. So unfortunately, the listeners can't see that. But I guess one of the things that I wanted to check in with you about were just the observational notation. So you've been really, really good about tracking everything. Based on what you've put in the check in there, from what I see, you feel really confident about picking out which days are fertile, which days are not, peak mucus, understanding all of that. How comfortable are you with the nitty-gritty of the observations? So categorizing what you see.
I feel pretty good, actually. It's funny, it's helped to have the group last as long as it did. I think it was 10 weeks. It's funny. I think my first understanding of it was not what it is now. And I think having that extended period of time really helped. But I do feel good about it. And it's funny how I was completely overwhelmed at first. And I'm like, you want me to do what and track what? And this is so like what there's 14 different ways to describe mucus. Are you kidding me? Like I didn't even know what mucus was and that it existed before this. But having it last the 10 weeks, by the end of it, it almost feels like second nature. And not to be overly confident because I could be, there's still so much more to learn, but it does feel like I feel very confident the difference between a red, a green, a light purple, and a purple.
Okay.
So that feels good.
And what Amelia is describing is just the Justice charting system. And so that's a charting system that I use. And I find that it does give that clarity of which days are actually fertile and not. I think a lot of women get confused. If you're not using a particular charting system, then you're at a point where you think that there's gray area, like as if you think that there's some days that could maybe be fertile and maybe not, but you're not really sure. But with this system, it's really clear which are fertile, which aren't. I just wanted to check in with you about some of the observations. I know you recently started using the Diva Cup. Is that right?
This is my first cycle on it. Yeah. That was an interesting experience.
I bet it was. Yeah. The first cycle is a little hard. I think if you switch to a cup, then it gets a little bit easier as you get used to it. The first cycle is a little awkward.
Like anything, right?
Like anything, yeah. So the reason I'm checking in is because it is possible to check for mucus on your light and very light days of your menstrual cycle. Is that something that you've actually done, or even before you started using the cup?
I think I did. I didn't see much of it during my light and very light days, but I did. Just the other day I did, but it wasn't finger testable. So, okay. But I was checking, and it did feel slippery.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I know I was looking at your chart. So last night I was preparing for the interview for our session.
But I think I'm on chart 5 now.
Yeah. Well, and there was that chart. So I think it's this chart that I have up here. And this was what happened in the middle of the group, where you were up to day, like say 26, 27. There's no signs of ovulation and nothing, not a whole lot's going on. So we're seeing a kind of delayed ovulation. I don't remember if there was anything that was going on that month, or if there were any things around that. But then on day 28, you began using your progesterone.
Yeah, which was silly of me, but
no, it wasn't, because you're following your doctor's instructions.
Well, but now that I'm like looking back and realizing that I didn't ovulate, I mean, I think that was the cycle. I was visiting my sister. She just had her baby, and I was in the hospital with her. Her husband had to like go take his medical boards the day after. So I was in the hospital, like not sleeping with her. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering if that had something to do with it. Because it was one of those situations I know you're familiar with, where like night is day, day is night. He only wanted to sleep like every hour and 45 minutes. So now looking back, I'm wondering if that's why I didn't ovulate, just because of that stress and lack of sleep. And
it's so interesting, because it's almost eerie. So whenever I see a chart like that and I kind of check in with my client to see if there was something going on, typically there is.
Yeah.
So something like that, where it's obviously a very significant, amazing moment that's super important, which your body can then interpret as a stressor, not only because of the significance of your new niece or nephew, but also because you're up late and all that. Like, so that makes a lot of sense. So, I guess a little bit of background there was that you received a prescription of progesterone cream, and that prescription was given to you on the basis of what exactly?
So it's actually the progesterone suppositories. I don't know if that makes a difference, but that was, so after I've had 2 very early miscarriages, and after the first, it was actually like me and my mom like looking into potential cases, causes. And I brought it up to my doctor and just said, is that, potentially what's going on? I think the first miscarriage was an anembryonic. I guess he said there's no harm, kind of thing. There wasn't any harm. And so we started doing the blood work. But again, at that point, blood work to test for progesterone. But at that point in time, we were working off of the 28-day cycle myth, which means that we were assuming ovulation was always taking place on day 14. And therefore, we were assuming that my mid-luteal phase was cycle day 21. And so we were testing there. And now, knowing what I know, it's like that was not the most accurate way to test. But I was getting I'd get a few reads where my progesterone was high enough and a few reads where it wasn't. And so since then, I have been able to test on my actual, day. Since I think you and I worked through that together to determine when would be the best time to test progesterone. And I did that just this last cycle, and it did come back below the lower threshold of what is ideal for your mid-luteal. So I do plan to continue taking the progesterone, at least for now.
Okay. And so the test that you sent, I don't know what you can see on my screen. Can you see if I switch, or can you just see the chart? I don't know what's showing.
I see the chart right now.
So you can't see. So the test that you sent me, is that the one that was recent?
This one might be even more recent. The number was 7.4.
Okay. And that was tested at the right time of the cycle, like peak day +3 or peak day +7. It's supposed to be
+7. Yeah.
+7. So peak peak day for the listeners is the last day that you see the peak mucus. And so as we're recording this the week after, so this isn't helpful for the listeners, but for you it is. The following Friday, so next Friday, I release an interview with Dr. Nora Pope. And in that interview, she basically takes the progesterone stuff to town. And oh my goodness, it's amazing. So she really clarifies when the test should be taken, why it's important to take them at the right time. And then she also clarifies what the appropriate levels should be of progesterone. And so, Amelia, I'm happy that you were able to share your experience. Also, I just want to take a moment and just say I'm really sorry that you had to experience not only 1 miscarriage, but 2. And it was kind of within a short period of time. And so that's really hard.
It has been. But I thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, and so then infuriating, because then you took it upon yourself to do some research and try to sort this out, which unfortunately is the reality for a lot of women, where you kind of do. So low progesterone can be a contributing factor, and the reason for low progesterone there could be all these other reasons for why it's low in the first place, but the actual progesterone level can obviously be a contributing factor there. And so you took it upon yourself to discover that and to ask your doctor about that, which is awesome to actually, take it into your own hands. But then my frustration lies in then how it's applied. So in your case, you were given, I would call it interesting direction as to when to take it. I think interesting is probably a nice way to say, as opposed to what I would like to say. Basically being told to start taking it, I'm guessing on day 14 or day 15 or something.
I wasn't given much direction. I think, on the day that you ovulate. So, which the problem lies in, they're going to tell me that I ovulated on day 14.
Well, and then of course the other problematic issue being that when they're doing the test to determine whether or not your progesterone is low, there's 2 issues there. So one issue is that they're testing on day 21, which, given what you said initially, that your cycles do fluctuate from shorter to on the longer end, if you have a cycle that's 36 days, you're not ovulating on day 14. That's just not what's happening. So not having it timed correctly for ovulation is a problem. But then also, what lab ranges are they using? And I think it'll be really helpful for the women listening to kind of get a sense of how important it is to have these things tested, but it's useless to have them tested if they're not being tested at the right time of the cycle.
Yeah.
So that's a really long-winded way for me to talk about what we're seeing in your chart here. So what happened in your chart, so this is chart 2, was that you started to take the progesterone before you had confirmed ovulation. And so then what happened is your temperatures kind of responded and they started to go up. And then it kind of looked like you might have ovulated, except that you didn't.
Yeah.
And so then it's kind of similar to then what happens like with hormonal contraceptives in the sense that you did have a bleed. So that would be called an ovulatory bleed. Can't talk. Mm-hmm. But that, I mean, progesterone can be used in a number of different ways. So if you're working with anything, so in terms of this conversation we're having about progesterone, first of all, progesterone isn't necessarily like a magic pill for every situation in everyone's case. This is something that, of course, Amelia consulted with her physician. It's something that you typically need a prescription for, and it's something that you should be using with a practitioner in the context of everything that's happening. And it may or may not be suitable to you. So, of course, I have to say that because I don't want to for women to get the impression that like, oh, well, this is the solution for everything. And for a lot of women, that wouldn't necessarily even be the first step. The first step could be sorting out other things that are happening. So it's best to consult with a practitioner for things like this. But anyways, so then in this cycle here that we're seeing, we did see, so then in your next cycle, which technically could be considered a continuation of your last cycle.
Oh.
Because you didn't actually ovulate. What you see is it kind of kick-started, like, so you notice you ovulated quite soon afterwards there. Mm-hmm. Looks like ovulation day happened on day 17.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed that my period was lighter. Like looking,
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be, so technically you could have, like if you had, so picture a piece of paper. So technically for me, what I used to do on my chart, because I used to have long cycles for various reasons. And so sometimes I would start a new chart if it was really long, but I would always put in brackets the total number of days. So whereas this cycle would be like 38 days plus 29 days, right?
Mm.
Right. So it's a way to think about it to get that you didn't really ovulate. So that's not really a period.
Mm.
But I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing because some practitioners would use progesterone in a way to try to give it to you at a certain time of the cycle to try to get your body back into a groove. So some practitioners would suggest for it to be used in different ways. But the thing is, when you're trying to get pregnant, if you start using the progesterone before you've ovulated, then obviously this is not helping you.
Yeah. I did confirm that the progesterone suppositories are bioidentical. Do you know anything about, like, would that potentially help my body to create it on its own? Or is it almost doing what the hormonal contraceptive pill did because it's getting it from an outside source? Is my body going to stop producing it? Do you know anything about that?
Well, my understanding of it is that, well, first of all, if a person is considering to take progesterone, my understanding is that synthetic progestin is not going to do anything good for your body. So if this is something that is suitable for you, then the bioidentical is what you're going to want to do. So, I mean, it depends on the practitioner that you speak to, but what it's doing when applied correctly. So essentially what you're doing is you're wanting to use the progesterone kind of in line with when your body's supposed to be producing it anyways. Yeah. So in a way, you're kind of supporting your body's hormonal cycle. And by doing that, it's possible that it can kind of help your body to sort it out. And but it depends. And this is why you have to use it with a practitioner, because then what happens is, for instance, like in the simplest terms, the way that we spoke about progesterone in the group and the role that it plays in the menstrual cycle. So as we know, in the first half of the menstrual cycle before ovulation, you have high estrogen levels, second half, high progesterone. Progesterone helps to ensure that the uterine lining is actually fully forming and able to support the life of a growing embryo. So there's certain changes that happen only if you have progesterone. And then you need to have progesterone for like 10 to 12 days because the progesterone sustains the uterine lining. I love analogies. So it's like you can think of progesterone as holding it up. If you don't have enough, then it falls. And that's when you would have a short luteal phase or that kind of breakthrough spotting before your period type of thing. So if you don't have enough, then even if you did ovulate and the egg was fertilized, it doesn't have anywhere to go because the lining's already falling. So then you have to be kind of monitored because if this is an issue for you, for some women, and this is something that Nora Pope spoke about at length in that interview, is that some practitioners then would want to monitor your progesterone levels throughout your pregnancy and make sure that they're where they're supposed to be. And if you're getting progesterone support before you get, so let's say you're on this progesterone and then you do conceive, you may want to continue to have those levels monitored because you may have to continue to take the progesterone through
your first trimester, right? That's what
it's possible. Yeah. But again, this is where science comes in. This is where you have to test your levels and compare them to where they're supposed to be. And if they're not where they're supposed to be, then you need to have a practitioner who's going to kind of dose it correctly to make sure that because this is not a shot in the dark. This is not like a do-it-yourself project of progesterone at will. Yeah. It's something that not every doctor is going to have the experience and the knowledge in this particular area. If this is something that you're wanting to look more into, my first suggestion would be if you have access to, say, a NAPRO technology doctor who is, they're trained in this particular area and they know how to monitor, they also know where their levels are supposed to be, how to monitor. And they also know if this is something that is for you, because I'm always afraid on the podcast to talk about something like this. And every woman listening is going to be like, that's for me, but it may not be for you. So part of it is is it for me? And then the other part of it is, if it is for me, I need to make sure that it's going to be done correctly because this is not a DIY project. And obviously I am not prescribing progesterone cream and I am not dosing it because I am not a medical doctor. I don't prescribe anything. I just kind of help to guide you so that you can understand how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. And how would you, I had tried searching for NAPRO and I basically got sent to it was the NFP, it was a Catholic church. Is there okay, awesome. Yeah. Okay. Is there a directory? Welcome. Oh, thank you.
Yes. So I will put a link in the show notes page for this. I'll have to remember to do that. So I guess there's a couple things to know. So this website then it says you can find a teacher, find a medical consultant. So NAPRO technology is kind of under the umbrella of natural family planning. And so there is that aspect of it. There's that type of wording. I have a NAPRO technology textbook. So there's certain types of wording that if you are not Catholic and you are not, it depends on where you're at in terms of your religious beliefs and those types of things. It's good to know that it is under the umbrella, but that doesn't affect the usefulness and accurateness of the information by any means. I'll put the link, like I said, in the show notes if anyone does want to know if there's a medical consultant close to them. And I guess one good thing to know is that the Justice charting system is based on a combination of the Cretan charting system, which is what NAPRO technology uses. So your NAPRO technology physician should be able to look at your Justice charts because it's the same language. Were there any charting specific questions that you had for me before we kind of move?
I mean, I think one area for me to better understand is a little bit more the count of three and where it applies. But I feel like the count of three is more for people who are trying to avoid pregnancy. So for my purposes, I feel pretty good about charting. It is really interesting to look at it retrospectively. And I think I think you did ask me that month, that cycle where it doesn't look like I ovulated, if something was going on. And I was like, no, everything, no. And now looking back, it's like, oh, well, I wasn't expecting my period at all. And then I think when I got on the plane to go out to St. Louis to visit my sister, that's when I started it. So I guess just saying like, so that was kind of a premature period anyways. And then, not really be sleeping for 3 days. Does that make sense? That like while I was on my period, that's how early that happened in my cycle, that I wasn't sleeping for 3 days. And then obviously I had to fly back. That would that would delay ovulation, even though it happened so early in my cycle.
It can. Like it definitely can, because I mean, it's what happens then when your body, it's that whole fight or flight response. So when you're undergoing stress, and I think it's really interesting because of how much this comes up with my clients, where traveling in particular, getting on a plane, going to a different time zone, even traveling by car somewhere, it's quite common. So if you were in my brain right now, you'd be seeing the like 6 clients that immediately come to mind who had this exact experience within the last 6 months, where it's like, I asked them like, oh, so was anything going on? Well, I did have to travel for business. And so, yes, it is possible. And then so when you're in that stress mode, your stress hormones go up, like cortisol, and there's the stress response. And then basically what happens is your ovaries are like, well, looks like this isn't a good time to procreate. And then they just kind of hang out.
It's so frustrating because like with the holidays, I want to go back out and see my nephew. And then I basically have to give up trying that month, because.
Well, I wouldn't see, the thing is that I wouldn't put it that way. Like you have to live your life.
Yeah.
So the way that, stress and illness and these things will affect it is that it often delays ovulation. So all that means is that you still would just chart your cycles. You do what you can to relax. And I wanted to ask you about your yoga practice, because you're a yoga teacher, which is super awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But so you can kind of try to do things to counteract some of that stress. But ultimately, one of the things to get down really when you're trying to conceive is to really be able to identify which days are fertile, which days aren't.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah. I think where my head is at. I was so surprised to hear that I had the fewer eggs. I had only 2 on one side in the follicular phase. So now I'm almost like, do I need to be focusing more on getting more estrogen? You know what I mean?
Well, I think that one thing to consider is that it's all connected. So the health of your menstrual cycle, it's very tempting to think that I'm taking progesterone, so let me take like it's probably, that's probably not a good idea.
Okay.
Just to kind of, there's things associated with estrogen you'd have to check with your practitioner to see, but typically the progesterone. So if you think about where the estrogen and the progesterone comes from, like I always have to take it there, right? But but so in your pre-ovulatory phase, it's called the follicular phase. And so then the estrogen is actually made by your ovaries, by your follicles. When you and then when you ovulate, so then you have like your follicles are producing estrogen, but then once you ovulate, the egg is released from that one follicle, and then the same follicle that was producing estrogen turns into the corpus luteum, and then it starts making progesterone. And so if you think about it, it's the same follicle. So if your body is having a hard time making progesterone and your levels are low, it could mean like, oh, my corpus luteum's kind of faulty. It's not really working the way it's supposed to. But if you think about it, it's the same follicle that was producing the estrogen. So then it would also potentially indicate that your estrogen production could also be low. So then if you support the whole body in terms of supporting your body's ability to produce hormones, looking into, there's a lot of different things that we're going to look into in our upcoming sessions together, as well as our sessions with the group. But in terms of, history of contraceptive use, potential nutrient deficiencies, what we're seeing on your chart, and because still, as I was looking through your charts, you have 5 charts, but because you kind of had that cycle thing there with the progesterone, I still don't have a real clear sense of what your cycles are doing, if that makes sense. Right? So we have a couple full charts where we see, but then we still have to kind of make sure that you're marking everything correctly so that I can get a really clear picture of what we're actually seeing. I think like it clicked, right? Because it's like, oh, because I had that one cycle and I started the progesterone, I didn't ovulate, and then so it's still, even though we have all these charts, we only really have like one full cycle where we can draw from, but I'm still going to encourage you to kind of keep better. I mean, you're doing a really, like, honestly, Amelia, you're awesome. Come on. But, but we want to get a really clear picture of what's happening. And I want to know what your mucus is doing. I want to know if it's peak. I want to know if it's non-peak. I want to know how much you're seeing. With all of those things, there's a lot we can do to support your body in general. When your body is healthier, then you're going to have a better eggs, you're going to have better estrogen and progesterone production. So I just want to encourage you to kind of think about it in that way, where that's why they have that marriage of Western medicine and natural medicine, for example, where you can have the progesterone cream applied at the right time of the cycle, but it doesn't mean that you're not also going to look at the whole picture and your diet and all the different things that come up. So,
on diet, I mean, I have, and I think I attribute the fact that my cycles have leveled off so much. Like they really have. I mean, one, obviously the progesterone is playing a little bit of a part, but even before I started that, when I've, removed alcohol and I really low gluten, like I have like one piece of Dave's all organic bread in the morning, and sugar. And I mean, I really to the best of my ability committed, and then been trying not to guilt myself when I fall. I've never been good at diets, but I've always eaten very healthy. But so I do see that change happening. Like I have, which is really nice and encouraging to see that like my cycles have leveled off so much from where they were before I made the diet changes.
Well, let me just say, because I did notice that, right? Because part of the massive intake form is a diet diary. But I did notice that. So I just want to say, I mean, it is not, what you're doing is not easy. Most of the time I don't have, what is it? Like I saw raw milk and
I'm trying to do, I haven't done much with raw milk, but I mean,
eggs cooked in grass-fed butter. I'm just she's doing her thing, man.
Right. It's hard.
Awesome. Yeah, it is.
Especially if you ever have to eat out or be social with people, you can't, it's not 100%, but definitely 80-20.
So you can take a moment and kind of take that in, because we talked about that in the group, because I know some of the women in the group made some drastic changes. And it's not easy. And I think, I guess what struck me as well, and we don't have time to go into this a ton today, but you have struggled with, some skin stuff for quite some time and eczema for years. And then you noted that you changed a bunch of things in your diet and it went away, which is huge, so we'll talk more about that in our sessions, but you're doing a ton. And so at this stage, what I would say is let's just keep tracking and kind of sort that out a little bit. Just the tweaking. I'm just doing my job. I'm not saying you're doing an amazing job, but of course I'm going to encourage you to keep on. And I think that it's never all or nothing. So one of the things that I like to say is, don't beat yourself up if you slip. Aim to do as best as you can. And, but if you really love whatever it is, like chocolate, then when you have some, give yourself a time when it's okay to have some and enjoy it guilt-free.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I guess to close out the interview today, what's something that you'd want to leave the listeners with, just in terms of your experience, in terms of everything that you've learned, and even just your experience, just in general as a woman coming into all this knowledge? And it's a big question, but what would you want to leave the listeners with?
So yeah, that's a lot. That's heavy. And I feel like I have so much to say, honestly, and so much that I think on that topic. But I guess just to be kind to yourself, to really use it as an opportunity not to compare yourself to other people. As much as it is obviously a physical function of our bodies, it's so connected to the mental and emotional. So on one quick side note, I did recently download the Circle and Bloom, and it's so interesting. And I haven't even started the full daily practices, which as a yoga teacher, I used to teach a practice called Yoga Nidra, which is the same thing. It is like walking you through this state of meditation, and you're kind of in between meditation, you're in between sleep and awake, but your body is getting all of these benefits through your mind. I love it. But I've only the last couple of nights I've done the freebie that she provided to people who've had miscarriages. And it's the strangest thing. I don't remember what she says because I listen to it in bed before I go to sleep. But my heart, like the space around my heart, this is my heart space. And when I wake up in the morning is like so much like lighter and spacious, and it feels so much better. So I appreciate that aspect of this care, the mental, emotional aspect.
Oh my goodness, Amelia. Thank you so much for sharing that. I always try to incorporate that aspect into the podcast, into the work I do in some way, shape, or form. I always try to sneak it in there because it's so important.
Yeah.
It can make such a difference.
Thank you for that. Yeah, your podcast has been so helpful in so many ways. So thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you so much for being here today, Amelia. It was great to have the opportunity to chat with you on air, having a very private conversation very publicly.
Yes, I know this will be, I don't know that I want to listen, but very happy because it's something that I've wanted to talk about, but you can't really just get on your soapbox on Facebook and talk about this. It's not quite socially acceptable yet, but yes, so I'm happy to share, and I hope that others do the same, and we as women can kind of support each other through this.
Oh, well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/112. I hope that you enjoyed the interview with Amelia today. I just want to thank Amelia publicly for sharing her story and her experience. I know that it will help a lot of women listening, just to kind of women who've experienced similar things, whether they've also experienced miscarriage, maybe more than once, or other challenges with respect to trying to conceive. And so, Amelia has faced these challenges with grace and with courage, and she's just an inspiration to the other members of the group. So I love that she just jumped right in and went full force with the charting. And I'm really excited to see what happens with her charts and where we're able to go from there. And so let me know if you've been enjoying my fertility awareness reality series. This is something that I decided to try. I wanted to share on air what I do with clients and some of the work that I do, because I know that some of you, are kind of like, what does she do again? What is the fertility awareness instructor? Of course, I do want to reiterate that I am definitely not a doctor. I'm not a naturopath, and I'm not playing one on the internet. I'm a fertility awareness educator. I'm a Justice holistic health practitioner intern, and any suggestions and advice that I give my clients within the context of our work together is also within the broader context of all of the health practitioners that they're seeing. So all of my clients are under the care of their own physicians and any other healthcare providers that they might be seeing, such as naturopaths or acupuncturists or any other types of healthcare providers. So I just want to be really clear that these episodes that I'm doing are not intended to be medical advice. They're just to showcase some of the work that I do with clients. And any work that I do with clients is, again, within the context of their entire health team. And so I am, in some ways, a coach or a support system, and I am able to support my clients in so many different ways. I'm able to utilize their menstrual cycle chart as a tool that helps me in that process. But like I mentioned, that is all within the context of the entire picture, and also within the context of each of my clients' kind of healthcare team. And if you have been enjoying this podcast, please do look for it on iTunes and leave a 5-star review so that more people can find it. And make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com and join my email list. If you have an idea for a podcast episode or a guest suggestion, send me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com. If you've been enjoying the Fertility Awareness Reality Series, I want you to let me know what you think about it. So you can also shoot me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com for that. And as you know, I am currently accepting applications for the next iteration of my Fertility Friday group program, and I'm so excited about it. And so I would encourage you to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program if you want to hear more information about how you can apply to become a part of my next group in January. And I just want to thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate all of you for taking the time to listen, to tune in every Friday with me and share in all of this great knowledge about fertility, health, women's health. Obviously, it's an area of passion for me. And I actually recorded 2 interviews today. And so it's kind of the end of the day when I'm recording my outro here. And really what I do with this podcast and the reason why I've been doing this for 2 years, it really comes from a place of passion. And unfortunately, sometimes it comes from a place of anger because I feel that to a good degree, a lot of the women that I see, women who end up coming to me and who I work with, I often find that, they're just not really being taken care of in the ways that they need to be by the system, kind of falling through the cracks. Whether it's that they're not being fully worked up, whether they're not fully getting the testing that they need or the investigation that should be happening around what's causing the problems that they're experiencing, whatever the case may be, that's the reason why I do this. The podcast, the intention behind it is to share options and so to share knowledge so that we can all know a little bit more about what options that we have if we're experiencing fertility challenges or reproductive challenges or menstrual cycle challenges, because unfortunately, it's just not part of the standard of care most of the time for most women. And so, I just thought I would share that with you today because, the longer that I do this, the more people listen and the more emails that I receive and the more women that I work with and the more that it becomes apparent that there's a real need for this type of thing. There's a real need for fertility awareness educators. There's a real need for people to step up and care that women are not getting the treatment and the care that they deserve. And so I just want to thank you so much for supporting me in what's become kind of a mission to empower and educate and raise awareness. And I just want to thank you for being here with me and being part of it. And so with all of that said, thank you so much. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.